Well, good afternoon, everyone, and my name is Ted Gardner, and I'm an interviewer for the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County. And I'm interviewing Howard McClain, who is a resident of Fort Thomas, Kentucky. This is March the 8th, 2007. We're at the main library, and our camera operator today is Dennis Daly. Dennis and I have worked together quite a bit on these interviews. And Howard, we're just delighted and honored to have you here and get you recorded, because it's important that we get as much recorded as possible. And where were you born, Howard?
Clarksburg, West Virginia.
Oh, you're a mountaineer.
Yeah.
That's great. And what year were you born?
1915, July 24th, 1915.
1915. Wow, that is really something. Did you go to school there in Clarksburg?
Yes, I did. Went to school, all my schooling was in West Virginia.
Is that
through high school?
Through high school, yeah.
I didn't live all the time in Clarksburg. I moved up to Weston, West Virginia, which is a little small town. 20 miles from Clarksburg.
Okay. Was your family in the coal business or anything like that?
No, my father was a carpenter.
Carpenter. That's interesting, I should say. Did you inherit any of that talent from him?
Well, I like to work with wood.
That's good. That's great.
I had a full shop until I got to the point that my legs bothered me, so I couldn't do it anymore.
I understand. What did you do in high school? Were there certain things that you liked?
I know I didn't like any of the activities they had as far as basketball or football or any of those things. I was lazy. No, I didn't enjoy that. And
What interest did you have? Did you have hobbies or anything like that?
Well, yes, I guess I did, perhaps. Maybe it wasn't the best.
Well, that's up to you.
No. Well, this leaves that way.
Okay, all right. We won't touch that.
No.
All right. Then after high school, what happened?
Well, as you would know, to get work any place was just almost impossible.
The Deep Depression. Yeah.
And so I wandered around just from one small odd job to another, help some farmer put in hay and put in the corn in the fall.
Right.
Just anything that you might find. Most of it was on a farm because the factories were all closed, and if there were several glass factories that was in there. They had a lot of glass down in that area of West Virginia, and also they had a lot of natural gas, abundance of natural gas, which they could use to fire the foundries with.
Right.
And that was the prevailing. Most of the work was in the glass factories or something that contributed to them. And the rest of it was mostly just farming.
Sure. Well, you, as I do, remember well the Great Depression.
Yeah, all was. My father had $300 in the Citizens National Bank. It closed. He couldn't get it out. He was along with a lot of other people.
Of course.
And $300 at that time was a magnificent sum.
That was a big sum of money, you bet. It took a long time to save $300.
Yeah, good 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Until Roosevelt declared the blank holiday or whatever it was.
Yeah.
He got some of that.
Yes, that's right. So you were in the class of 1933? 1934.
Yeah.
Very good, very good. So life went on, and anything?
Yeah, I can, from after, Roosevelt came in and set up many agencies.
Yes.
And one of them that was possible for me to get into was the National Youth Administration.
Oh.
And it was supposedly they were have a place set up that you could go there and learn some trade of some kind.
Right.
But unfortunately, that was not the case in most instances. And it was just a money thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, we were given clothes, and we worked a little bit, very little, I might say. And our meals and a place to live. And the area, the one that I was in, I think there was about 25 boys, and probably about my age. And so my mother had taught me all the basics of cooking.
Oh.
Just the very basics, you must have that.
Sure.
And so they had a cook, a civilian cook, in this place, the organization I was in, National Youth Administration. And he had marital troubles when a new manager, a new person came in, and he said, Mac, you can cook, can't you? And I said, yeah, like that. He said, you want the job? $60 a month.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Big go.
I jumped off the cruise tower for $60
I should
a month.
say.
Anyway, I took the job as a cook, and I didn't have him starved to death, but he wasn't probably the best. And I was promoted in the thing. I think I got $160 a month a bit later.
Wow.
And I was really riding on air then.
I'll say. Oh, that's great. Of course, you were able to learn along the way.
Yeah, I did.
And expand your knowledge of cookery, huh?
And then I met my girl that became my wife, and we were married, and then there was a organization in Newark, New Jersey, that had a contract with feeding young men that were going to an aeronautics school that was in the area. I didn't, what a government organization, I don't know. But anyway, they were there training in aeronautics, and this company that I went to Newark to cook for had the job of feeding them. And I went there, didn't stay long because I didn't like Newark, but came back and went back with the organization I'd been with previously. And then Uncle Sam called in 1941, December the 7th, I think it was. And a bit later I was called up for the first time, but because I had an eye that was I virtually don't see anything. Get daylight and dark, but I don't see much.
Right.
And they would turn me down, as I told him a bit earlier. And draft boards had a problem of filling their quota each month, or each time they were called. So I was sent up, and the Army says, oh no, no way. So I would go back. Okay, the next time the call came for somebody, I would be included in the group because I was a fill-in, see?
Sure.
It didn't make any difference then whether I go went or not, but they could fill the, I helped fill their quota.
Right.
And I did that 3 times.
For heaven's sake.
It sent me back home. The 4th time, why I was working in Huntington, West Virginia at the time, and so I was drafted and came to Fort Thomas.
Right. Well, they should have recognized your culinary artistry. You could be a cook.
And as I said, the Fort Thomas liked to pick out the cooks that could cook, rather than get a trainee and teach him.
You bet.
So they saw I cooked, so they took me off and kept me at Fort Thomas. And then, as I told him, that's where he, everybody else, they send so many of them in there periodically from various places in Kentucky, West Virginia, and Ohio.
Right.
And they would grade them to whatever qualification they thought they would fit in best, artillery, or infantry, whatever. And they would send them to a school that was basically that quality.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be in California, it might be in Maine, Colorado, it didn't make a difference everywhere. And so they would put a cook and a couple of KPs on a train in a cook car located in between the two. It may have 4 cars, sleeper cars on the front, 4 on the back.
Right.
And the men was trusted the delegates to go in there.
Sure.
We were our cook cars in the middle, so they would file by us at mealtime, get their food, and go back to the other end, and then the other would do the reverse.
Right.
And we'd take them to wherever, and then we were treated just royally. They would give us Pullmans to come back, and our meals were in the cook cars, and the dining cars.
Right.
That was the most wonderful thing that I had encountered in my life. I had never saw anything like that. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Sure.
And then we would come back to Cincinnati, and then when they needed somebody else, another train to go out, well, there was all kinds of people that we would go out again.
And train travel was fun, wasn't it?
Yes.
I enjoyed train travel in those days.
Oh, it was delightful.
It was wonderful.
The not going out particularly because we had cars that weren't good. They were mostly cattle cars out there.
Yeah, right.
But on the way back, we had Pullmans and the best of food that our train had. We had so much money, we were a lot of them. We could get whatever we wanted.
Oh, yeah.
And I would come back to the Union Station over here, and that was just a wonderful place. And I got to Lawrenceburg and Pennsylvania, or whatever train I was going to come through there. And
Right.
in 20 minutes, I was going to be in Cincinnati, and that was the most beautiful place I ever saw.
Yeah, that Union Terminal is just a magnificent building, of course, and I'm not a native Cincinnatian, so I was not here during the war. I came to Cincinnati much later than that, but it must have been very, very exciting there in that terminal with all the trains coming and going and men and women from all over the country and changing trains and moving on and so forth.
It was. There was the saddest thing I think I encountered. They would take the trains that they would ship these selectees to their various destinations pull them up to the depot station in Newport.
Mm-hmm.
And there's where was the last time a lot of them saw their relatives. Some of them were killed and never came back.
Right.
But regardless of that, it was heartbreaking. There was husbands leaving wives and children. Everybody was crying.
Oh gosh.
It was really a sad occasion, a sad
Yeah.
affair. I hated to see it, but there wasn't like yourself. Couldn't do anything about that.
That's right. That's life, you know. That's life.
And like I said to he a few minutes ago, if we hadn't been through people going out like that, as he said, we might have been speaking Japanese.
Absolutely. Japanese or German or something like that, I should say. Well, I'm sure that your experience is like that too. And you know, those are all growing experiences for a young man.
Yeah.
And it certainly helps you through your life to be able to deal with all sorts of things.
Yes. Well, then to finish on the rest of the story, why in 44, I believe it was, I think I'm correct, they no longer needed as many people as these draft stations were sending in.
Right.
The war was winding down and they could see the end of it. or thought they could. And so they did away with the Select T training, or Select T station in Fort Thomas, closed it out immediately. And so they had to do something with the people that were workers there, like myself. So they sent us all over, and I was sent to Fort Lewis, Washington.
My goodness.
And they couldn't have done anything nicer than that for me.
Isn't that great? Yeah.
All the way out to Montana on the electric trains.
Oh my
and
God.
Mount Rainier.
Wow. I should say you got to see
Where I slept, in the barracks I slept in, each morning I could look up and there was Mount Rainier.
Yeah.
Sticking at you.
right there by Tacoma.
Yeah.
Tacoma, Washington.
Just, you know where it is.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm from Oregon originally, outside of Portland.
Yeah.
So I know that part of the country very well.
Yeah, I've been to Portland several times. I used to go there. Later in my life, I started growing roses, and that was the headquarters of the Rose
Oh
Society.
yes.
So I know about Portland.
Wow.
It's a delightful place too.
It is. It's a beautiful place. Well, that's interesting about your rose growing. That's a hobby of yours?
It was, yes. Later on I got too busy in my occupation that I couldn't take care of them like they should be, and you have to take care of roses.
Oh, they're very sensitive, you bet.
And so rather than see them go to pot, which they wouldn't do shortly, why I gave them to someone, and he came and dug them up and took them and replanted them.
Right.
And
Well, you know, one of the slogans of Portland, Oregon, one of the slogans is, for you, a rose in Portland grows. Did you know that? And of course, they've got the great international test garden out there, you know.
Yeah.
And of course, the climate is just perfect for roses. The soil and the weather and everything. Well, then, how long were you at Fort Lewis?
About 6 months.
Okay.
And I knew there was something wrong. I didn't know I had indigestion. And so I went up for an examination, and they gave you the GI series, of course.
Right.
And one day when I came back in from training where it was, they had a notice, McClain report to the first sergeant's office, and he said, turn in all your equipment, you're going to the hospital. And which I did, of course, that. And they said, you have an ulcer of the stomach.
Oh my goodness.
And we will treat you for it, which I suppose they did. Anyway, it didn't occur any while I was there. And then they said, a person with ulcers or some other problem, we don't need to send them to the islands or any place else because they'll be a handicap.
Right.
We've got enough sick people there now without sending somebody that's likely to be. So they discharged me.
Uh-huh. That was
And I was glad to see that.
I should say, that was a welcome order.
When I went up before this group of generals who were sitting back in ivory chairs.
Yeah, right.
They said, Private McClain, do you think you can stay on your diet when you went home? I said, yes, sir, I know I can.
Happily so.
No problem whatsoever.
No problem at all. Well then, but you were out there, you were at Fort Lewis when this happened, right?
Yeah.
So they sent you back by train, did they?
Yeah, first class.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah. First class.
I should say, now, you were married at this time,
Yeah,
right? My goodness, you had a young bride.
And a daughter.
And a daughter. Isn't that something? Wow. Were they ever happy to get you back? Oh my gosh. That's terrific. Get daddy home. How old was your daughter when you came back?
I guess he was a year and a half, maybe.
Oh, very young, very young. I see. And you came back to Fort Thomas?
Yeah.
And you lived there ever since?
Yeah. I really, the first time that I came to Cincinnati from Fort Thomas while being stationed out there when I first came out. All the GIs did, of course. I came through Fort Thomas and on a streetcar, and I thought they were the loveliest homes and the most well laid up place that I had ever been in previously. So I had written to my wife, who was in Illinois at the time. She'd gone out there with her brother, and for the duration. And I wrote to her and I said, if and when I come back, I said I would love to live in Fort Thomas.
Oh boy.
So I've been fortunate enough to.
Yeah, that's so nice.
And to my wife was a German ancestry.
Right.
Her father was from Germany, and she liked the Cincinnati and its German influence that it had. And I like it too. I think it's the most delightful place.
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. You know, I came from the West Coast originally, and have now lived here for 50 years.
Yeah.
But it's just a wonderful place to
It
live.
really is.
Yeah. Well, now, did you have any other children?
Yes, I had one daughter about 6 years later. We had another daughter. And
Oh, that's
and
nice.
she lives here in Cincinnati, and the oldest daughter lives in Atlanta.
Well, you, my goodness, you're a venerable citizen, and I'm sure the community is very proud of you. And I think that's just wonderful. Now, when you came back, what did you have in mind to come back home to your family, and what you were going to do?
Well, while I had been a cook, why I saw this wonderful thing that's called refrigeration,
Oh yeah.
and which was new to me, because we had never had a refrigerator because we didn't have electricity. And so I would see the repairman come in and check things and repair things as this was necessary. And I also saw the bills of some of them that he submitted when he left. And they would just, it's open for anybody to see. He wasn't hidden or anything, but that price I saw that he charged for his services, and it seemed, hey, I'd like to be in that.
Yeah.
So I had the GI and the educational bill was available to me. And at that time, there wasn't any trade stations that taught refrigeration, air conditioning, or electricity in Cincinnati. But there was in Chicago, Industrial Training Institute. So they had a program where you could you studied the homes that your lessons in, and I did that a short time, but that one wasn't what I wanted. So I went to Chicago, and I didn't finish the course, but I got enough that when I came back, I went to, I can't think of the name of the furnace and refrigeration people that I went to work for in the beginning, but later on I was with Carrier in Cincinnati. Pardon. And then later I went with the industrial branch of Carrier some years later, who handled all the air conditioning for this building here has Carrier, and New Purdue Tower and all that. It was big units, hundreds of tons, and that was a nice experience. But it had a drawback. Okay, you would be in Indianapolis, Louisville, Huntington, Columbus, wherever there was a problem, you went.
Right.
And in that time, the daughters had both grown. Right. And my wife was working, but she was there by herself. And so they started a new hospital in Fort Thomas, and hadn't been going along, and I knew the manager, or I forgot what you call him, but anyway, he said, "Mac, I'm going to get air conditioning in the hospital." I said, "What kind are you going to get?" Well, he didn't know one from the other, and I said, "You're going to get absorption, you're going to get centrifugal, you're going to get recip." Well, that was a blank wall for him. And I was trying to show up his ignorance, but I could.
Sure.
And so he said, "Would you like to have the job?" I said, "I don't think you can afford me." And he said, "Put down what you have to have, and I'll see." And I put it down, and I got it.
I'll be darned.
So I spent the rest of my working years at St. Louis Hospital in charge of maintenance and engineering.
Wonderful. Well, and you've seen that place grow too, haven't you?
Oh,
St. Luke, isn't that an amazing?
yeah.
This is an amazing place.
Oh, I worked up at Christ too, and Christ is
Oh,
like that,
I know it.
and a delightful hospital.
Yeah, wonderful hospital. Well, let's go back a little bit into your service period. You got any funny stories to tell? Anything that you, any funny stories, experiences with other soldiers, or in a relationship with officers, or camp conditions, or anything like that?
Well, I've got one.
Good.
It was in Little Rock, Arkansas, and we were going out on the rail siding, as you know you would be from the city, you weren't up in town. And their government had gotten screwed, as they always do, by somebody had sold them coal, like somebody said it wouldn't burn in hell with the blowers on.
Wow.
And I was trying to cook dinner. We were headed for Texas. I don't know where in Texas, forgotten now, but anyway, the fire wouldn't burn at all. And here I was having to feed these people. And so the civilians at that time were crying for butter. We had loads of butter on the train, more than we needed. So I started putting pounds of butter in the stove. It was a coal burning stove, but I shoved a pound of butter down in there, and it helped a lot.
Well, I'll be darned.
And
Yankee ingenuity, that's what it is.
so, of course, got the meal over, and as a friend said, and all the civilians out there, their tongue were hanging out for butter, and you were putting it in the furnace.
Yeah, butter was rationed, I should say. Oh, that's a good one. That was very, very, very creative of you. Anything else that comes to mind? You got down into Texas, did you? Do you know did you spend any time in Texas?
Just take people there and let them know. Fort Bliss.
Oh, Fort Bliss down in El Paso.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And I took them all over. There were very few states that I did not make. Maine, I did never make the Maine, but I was in Wisconsin, Colorado, Alabama, Georgia,
Sure.
Texas, Arkansas.
Oh, yeah.
You got to go to all of them.
Right.
Because they sent you, they said.
Now, then, did you do traveling with your wife on vacations and so forth after the war?
Yes, not as much as we wish we had.
Yeah, I know. That's always the way.
We went to Colorado, we went to San Francisco, we went to Atlanta, we went to Canada,
Well,
and over the years.
sure, I'd say you did darn well. You know, as a soldier, as you were, there was a nice feeling about it during the World War II. And of course, today we honor our service people very, very highly, you know, and thank them for what they're doing. But, you know, during the World War II, there was a different attitude,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
as you are well aware.
Yeah.
Different from even what it is today. And the spirit of the people, the spirit of the country, how it came together to do the job.
Yeah. Everybody wanted to.
Everybody wanted to, and they were willing to sacrifice. Yeah.
And immediately afterward, when anybody wanted to do anything, and desecrated things
Right.
all over the country.
Absolutely.
The gangs that came afterwards, that had all these rallies and wore the flag on their back and
Yeah.
all that nonsense.
Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. Yes, it's entirely different. Tell me, did you, in Fort Thomas, did you build a house or did you?
No, I bought one.
You bought a house,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I was entitled to that loan.
Yes.
That the GI were.
Sure.
At that time was available.
Sure.
And so that was a wonderful thing.
I should say, well, that was great. And of course, the GI Bill, as you pointed out, was so helpful to so many millions of young men and women who came back. Very, very fortunate, strengthened our country and helped build it up and so forth. And, well, you know, they've called us the greatest generation. I'm not so sure about that, but we certainly did our bit.
Yeah.
And I tell you what you've done and what your influence, not only as a soldier, but as a citizen and a solid rock citizen in Fort Thomas with your family. Well, you're lucky to have your daughter here in town. And how about your wife?
Yeah, she's here.
How about that? Is she
Yeah.
your age?
Yes.
How about that?
No, she's 1 year younger than me.
Well, that's close.
Yeah, she met him a while ago. I had a large picture of myself, and I thought, well, these people would probably like to see it here.
Of course, absolutely. More
Anyway,
pictures
but
the
I didn't
better.
want to give them the big one. So we took it over to the poster on the corner here and had a small one made.
Oh, yeah.
Made some small ones.
Sure.
And so I gave him one.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well,
She went to the home and food show, whatever it is, across.
oh yeah. You know, in one of the things I noticed, traveling across the country during the war, from one post to another or one assignment to another, to be able to see the country, the other parts that you didn't know about.
Yeah.
Like you're going through Colorado and seeing the mountains and Montana and all that sort of thing.
Cheyenne, Wyoming.
Cheyenne, Wyoming, what a dusty old town that was in those days. The dinky little town too.
One of the most beautiful sights I think that I ever saw in my life, but on the railway between Denver, Colorado and Cheyenne, Wyoming, I don't know, 200 miles, 300.
Right.
But anyway, they're lakes, I guess they're man-made, and in the wintertime, while the waterfowl from Canada are migrating south.
Right.
And I passed by a lake in Colorado. I can't imagine telling you how many colors and hundreds or thousands of birds,
Yeah.
lakes, geese, probably anything you could name
Sure.
on that lake.
Isn't that something?
It was outstanding.
Just beautiful, I should say. That's a rare experience and something you never forget.
Yeah, I went, some later years, I went down in Indiana to the lower sections of it, and Illinois, in the flyway.
Yes.
I would hope to encounter some of the same things again, but I didn't. It was too early in the season, or the lakes weren't big enough, or what, but I didn't see them there like I saw them in Colorado.
Well, now, also, you mentioned going to Fort Bliss. Well, then you went all the way across Texas.
Oh, yeah.
Which took 2 or 3 days just being inside the state.
Yeah. And
God, that's a big state.
and the windstorm, sand and windstorm came, and it blew sand through the crack cars or the cook cars, and sand was in the spinach, it was in the beets, it didn't make any difference how much you tried to close, you couldn't stop it.
You couldn't stop it.
No.
Oh my gosh.
Sandstorm, put it away.
Well, you had to throw all that stuff out then, did you?
No, we fed it to them.
That's good.
Sort of serves as a laxative, I'd tell you.
Yeah, right. Give him a little wake-up call with grit in your spinach.
It wasn't really that much, but it did get in.
Sure.
We closed it all the best we could. It was in a box. They put this kitchen in a boxcar, which had the two big sliding doors on the side, or one, which is
right.
And they, of course, you had to have them open because you didn't have any electric lights in there. And so, maybe it was been one winter, so I don't forgotten. But anyway, yeah, I know Fort Bliss real well.
I should say, well, that must have been quite an eye-opener for you too, because it's so dry down there, you know, so different from West Virginia and Kentucky and Ohio, which is so green and wonderful. I know that is. I don't know if I'd want to live down there or not.
No way. I've been there since, and I was some other places in Texas. And when it rained, it might rain for an hour, and you can see it on the surface. You went out 15 minutes later, it was nothing but sand.
Right.
That's it. You didn't see it more.
Terrible. I know. It's very unusual. Very unusual. Well, tell me a little bit more. Do you remember anything more about Fort Lewis? I think that's fascinating because I haven't interviewed hardly. I don't think I've interviewed. You're the first one I've interviewed who had some experience at Fort Lewis, and that's only 150 miles north of my hometown in Oregon.
Well,
how about the tall trees and
the landscape and the forest were just beautiful.
Yeah,
they really were.
Right.
And my wife had relatives in Tacoma, and that was not far from Fort Bliss, maybe 15 miles or so. There was a bus around there.
Right.
And I went down there a time or two and visited them, and they took me around the city of Tacoma and the zoo and this and that.
Well, and that was nice to make that family connection too, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Probably something you wouldn't have done on your own.
Well, since the war, since I've gone back there, go to Vancouver, Canada, and all those places.
Oh, it's so beautiful up there.
And okay, after we were supposedly recuperating from our illness, some were ill and some were not, they decided, okay, you got all these GIs laying around this room and they're raising hell and creating problems. So we're going to launch a ship at the Tacoma yards. So we'll get an Army bus and we'll get these suckers off the rear end and get them out of here and let them get down and say, launch this warship.
Sure.
So a lot of people reluctantly did. I liked the idea. I want to see that. A lot of them didn't want. They wanted to play cards and cat crouch and all that sort of thing. But anyway, I remember one that had a whack captain. She was in charge of the bus, so the guy. Of course, they didn't care for her either, and she wasn't very pretty. And anyway, they got down. When you went into the shipyard, you couldn't just anybody walk into the shipyard where they launched the ship, or made it either. So one guy got up and said, Captain Smith, I have to go to the bathroom. Well, can't you wait till we get inside? No, we gotta go now. So, okay, we'll wait for you just inside. Well, I knew this is what was said, that she would never see him again. Yeah. So he got on off, and I think some others must have used the same clue, I don't know, but I knew about him. They didn't ever come back. They headed for the nearest saloon.
I'll be,
And that night about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, the uplift dammed up roar, you know, it came this gang of drunks.
waking up the whole barracks.
Really, they had the whole hospital wing broke up.
Oh my God.
Which didn't make any difference, but a lot of people in it weren't very sick. But the next morning, the captain called this one bird up, and he said, why didn't you come back with Captain Smith? Well, I'll tell you why I didn't come back. We saw him launch that ship, and I saw it, and I thought maybe it was going to sink, and I thought I'd better stay and see if I could help him get it out.
Oh, for God's sake.
Back to duty.
What a story. So you did see the ship launch?
Oh, yeah, I saw the ship launch.
Oh, that was an interesting sight too, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Well, being, Tacoma being a port city there and being on Puget Sound and not too far from the ocean, was a very interesting city.
Yeah.
They had big sawmills there too, big lumber mills.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Weyerhaeuser had big mills there.
Yeah, in later years, I went there and I got a car and drove over to the coast from where I was in Portland. I wanted to go over to the point where explorers went to the West Coast.
Lewis and Clark.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I wanted to go to their point of arrival on the West Coast.
Oh yeah, on the beach.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I did. And some of those magnificent trees are still standing.
Right.
And a lot of places, the equipment they used to cut those trees into lumber are still there. The lumber company didn't see it in their best interest to move it. They just left it.
Right. Right.
And after the cutting was all over, well, they didn't need anywhere else.
That's right.
Bandsaws and logging engines. It was immense.
I know.
Terrific.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is. It's beautiful country, and I grew up about 60 miles from Fort Clatsop, which is where Lewis and Clark had their winter in 1805. Just imagine.
All the rocks, the huge mountains of rocks that are out of the coast,
Yeah.
and the seabirds that are on them. Oh,
I know it. It's gorgeous country and so interesting.
what's the tree out there that doesn't grow anyplace else? It's a real nice little wood.
Myrtle wood.
Yeah, myrtle.
Myrtle wood.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I got a clock made out of that.
Oh yes, that's beautiful stuff.
Yeah.
It's so hard, you know, and dense.
Mhm.
It's very slow growing. It's almost like a shrub.
Yeah.
But the wood in it is just beautiful. And there's an industry out there of people that make things out of myrtle wood, you know.
Yeah, we've got a clock two clocks that I bought out there.
Uh-huh.
And some years ago, somebody in what used to be the old Gibson Hotel moved in and set up a shop or a sales place. I guess they were from it because everything they had was myrtle wood.
Oh yes.
But it didn't go over. People didn't buy it. And I bought some of it. When they got it, they weren't going to make it, so they sold it out relatively cheap.
Sure.
And
Right. Well, it is a beautiful wood, and it turns nicely on a lathe and all that sort of thing, you know. Well, that's interesting that you knew about that. Of course, out there they're very, very proud of the tall Douglas fir trees, you know, and all the big timber. Well, you said you went to Canada?
yeah,
Now, this was after the war?
yeah, this was after the war.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was an automobile trip, was it?
Yes, it was. I wanted to, in history, I had read battle in Canada. Called, it was on the Plains of Abraham.
Yes.
And I envisioned just a huge plane. In the storybooks that I read, and
Sure.
I just pictured a huge plane out there with troops all over the place. And here, when they dig in the football field.
I know. Yeah, the French and the British.
Yeah.
Yeah, Plains of Abraham and Quebec.
Both the commanders were killed.
Yep, yeah.
And there's a church down over the hill, I guess you'd call it. It's down in the lower level. An old church and an old graveyard. And I met a man who had been there a long time. And he said, go see the cemetery, and I did. And he said, there's nobody knows these people at all. And the monuments are rather a cheap monument, I suppose, or the easiest thing they can make. The names are just virtually gone off of them, eroded by the wind and the air and so forth.
Yeah.
And those were men, Englishmen, that lost their lives in the Battle of Abraham.
Just imagine. Gosh.
And
boy. Well, that's fascinating history, and I can see that you have a great interest in that sort of thing.
yeah, I like history a great deal.
I do too, yeah. Well, that's, did you make any friends in the Army that you had close connection with?
No.
Not really?
Oh, bums.
All bums.
No, they weren't any close to this area that I knew.
Yeah.
And in fact, I remembered very few of their addresses. The closest one I knew was Huntington, West Virginia. And at one time, he said, I had a letter from him or a card, I've forgotten which. But I think I have probably answered him, but I never heard from him again.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it's interesting how different situations lend themselves to be, as you say, get close with friends or something like that, and other times you just it just isn't a comfortable thing. I know what you mean.
I'll tell you a funny one.
Good.
That's why I got sent to Fort Lewis, Washington. I was a cook on duty in the mess hall one evening who had latecomers or draftees they might bring in after mess hall hour.
Right.
And the captain of the mess hall, Captain Begbie, was not as good as he could have been. And he was married, and he cheated on his wife constantly. She was aware of that. And she was constantly checking on him. So she came to the mess hall one evening, and I was on duty, of course, and he had told me where he was. He says, if my wife asks where I am, comes by, tell her that I went to an officer meeting. So I'd almost forgotten about it. And here this girl pops up on the, she wasn't a girl either, she was wanted to have a hatchet out. And she said, first Lieutenant Begbie. I said he went to Masonic Lodge. That was wrong. He had told me where to tell him, and I'd forgotten.
Oh my gosh.
He said, officer meeting, and I said Masonic Lodge. Well, she knew that Masonic Lodge didn't meet that night.
Uh-huh.
When he rolled in drunk and smelling the girls all over him, whatever, at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, she had the axe out and the club and everything else, and she was dressing him down.
Oh boy.
And he didn't appreciate that, and I wouldn't have either. But anyway, he called me up and he said, USB, I want to see you in the morning. I want you to be there when I'm coming. I knew I was in trouble. But I always, and there was another officer overheard the conversation that he had used me over the telephone, but I don't know if he would have come up in my defense or not, but it doesn't make any difference. And I'm sure that this is what happened. This woman, his wife, probably said to him, if you go over there and do anything to that boy, I'm going to display you all over the fort.
Oh.
I just assumed that was what it was, because in the morning when he came in, he was as pleasant as you are. He said, I said, you want to see me, Captain? Go home. I didn't hesitate.
He'd gotten the message, hadn't he?
He had gotten the message. I don't know who sent it, but somebody sent it.
Oh boy. Isn't that something?
So we were, at that time, we were coming up to be dispersed all over the country because they were doing away with that.
Right.
All my buddies that I was in the crew with, they went to Louisiana. It was hot as hell down there.
Oh,
and I know that Lieutenant Davis says, send that SB as far away from me as you can get him. That was my assumption of what happened.
Sure.
So I went to Fort Lewis, Washington. It was the most wonderful thing that ever happened to me.
Well, I'm glad it worked out for you. That's just great. Well, honestly, it's just been such a pleasure to meet you and talk with you. And I just think, you know, without a good cook, life is pretty rough. I'll tell you. And as we all know, there were some bad cooks in the service.
Oh yeah, that's certainly
No matter whether it was Army or Navy or
Where were you in the Army?
I was in the Navy.
Oh.
I was in the Navy, and I was in the South Pacific on I had two different ships that I served on. And if you were stuck on a ship with a bad cook, and you were out in the South Pacific, I mean, that was terrible, because there were no replacements out there, you know. If you were on land in the States, that was a different story, but a bad cook on a ship in the far Pacific, that was a pretty bad hand of cards that you were dealt. But no, I was very lucky to, like you, and here we are, survivors. My gosh. And I do want to emphasize again that Veterans Day on the 11th of November, and you make sure that you can get down here for the great program, because you will enjoy it tremendous, and you'll be recognized, and we'll have a place for you up front so you can hear well, and with your wife too, of course. That's very important. And we're both lucky because we've lived a long time and we've got our wives with us still. So many people, of course, are single now, you know, and a widower, and that's a hard way to go sometimes. Well, I guess that if you've got any more funny stories, we'd like to hear them.
If I think of any more, look you up someday.
Now, did you spend any time in Cincinnati itself? You were at Fort Thomas,
Yeah.
but did you live in Cincinnati, or?
No.
You worked over here though?
I worked in was in Fort Thomas, and the mess hall, of course, was there.
Yes.
And I was barracks there.
Right.
Later on, my wife had problems where she was in Illinois with her brother, and she came later, sometime later, to Fort Thomas and rented an apartment, which she and my daughter, and they were there when I left to go to Fort Lewis.
Oh, I see.
And she, of course, stayed because she couldn't come to Fort Lewis. That was too big a move.
Right.
And there was no place for her to go anyway.
Right, exactly.
And
well, that must have been that party must have been a tough situation.
Yeah, it wasn't something I
Yeah.
learned too much. But
Yeah, I know what you mean. Well, by golly, I think we're just very fortunate to have the opportunity to talk to you, and I wish you well and good health, and keep fighting, as we used to say, keep them flying.
Yeah.
Keep them flying, that's the way it was. There were so many wonderful slogans and sayings in that World War II era because of the spirit of the people and everything, you know. Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition. Remember that one?
Oh, yeah. And
Okay.
the girls that sang drinking rum and Coca-Cola.
Oh yeah, the Andrews sisters.
Yeah.
Remember that? Oh my gosh, drinking rum and Coca-Cola. Boy, that was really something.
Lay in the hot sand and cool off.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, we've had the honor and the joy of interviewing Howard McClain from Fort Thomas here, and he's told us some wonderful stories and given us a feeling of what it was like in those days, and here as an outstanding citizen, and we're so thankful to you, Howard, and God bless you, and we thank the Public Library and Dennis Daly for all they're doing for us here.
And I'm here every week.
Good for you. I'll look you up, because I come every week too. And thank you so much.